What is the most stupid way you ever got injured? Found a poisonous snake with my brother. I was 14. He ran away and I yelled, "You're a pussy," as I bent down to pick it up. It bit me, and I had to spend 9 days in the hospital. Twisted my ankle jumping off a trampoline in a gym once as a kid. That wasn't the stupid injury though. The stupid part was that I jumped again, which resulted in 2 fractures. I was sleeping one afternoon, and all my weight had fallen on my arm. As a result, my arm fell asleep too, and got dead numb. The phone started ringing, and the sound somehow blended in my dream, causing me to dream about a fire alarm going off. I got panicked in my sleep, and that panic continued when I realized that the ringing wasn't just in my dream, it was happening for real. So I popped up, sleepy and confused, and started running towards the source of the noise. Comically enough, my arm was so numb that it was beyond my control and was flailing randomly by my side, crashing onto nearby walls and furniture as I was running towards the sound. It was like running with a jelly-like arm, like the one Harry Potter had in HP and the Chamber of Secrets, when Lockhart deboned it accidentally. Anyway, I don't know which of the billion crashes and bumps was the one that did the job, but that's how I dislocated my pinky. It was a good hit, and my finger stood at a really weird angle afterwards, so I had to go to the doctor to put it back in its place. Hurt like a bitch too. During the brief period in history when planking was a thing, I planked across the bench seats of a 15-passenger van and tore my bottom rib off of the muscle. To this day it's all floaty and weird and constantly reminds me what an idiot I am. I'm a drummer. I was on the road and a full-grown ass man. Not me, but a co-worker I worked out with. He broke his sternum by doing push-ups. All I heard was a pop, and he froze. Started having trouble breathing. Called DEMS to be safe. Turns out he moved just right and it snapped. I was trying to shake the water off the knife and cut my thigh. I was pretty drunk. Dislocated all of my fingers, my knee, and my shoulder trying to drain spaghetti noodles. Luckily the finger dislocations meant I held onto the pot, so I didn't also drop it and splash boiling water all over myself. I broke my arm when I was about 8 due to falling out of a treehouse wearing roller skates. I stepped on a nail, but I didn't realize because it didn't hurt, so I thought I just stepped on tape since it was sticky, and I just kept on walking, and that's when I saw all the blood. Right, so if you're like me, when there is a railing on a path you'll slide your hand across it for some unknown reason. Well, I once tried this on a spiked fence and cut my hand open because my brain just inserted the smooth rail on top of it. Story time. So it was my second year of high school, which puts me at around 12 over 13 years old. I had skipped breakfast this morning because I was running late and I was a hungry boy. So when the morning interval comes, I, like so many of my peers, head towards the cafeteria. I wanted to beat the queue, so I was running. The corridor that lead to the cafeteria was a wide, sort of common area with lockers and vending machines at either wall, so it was a busy place. Worse yet, there were some older students set up at a table, selling some kind of raffle ticket. The universe did not want me to get my breakfast, as the queue for these tickets was long enough to block my entire path. But I was not to be deterred. Improvise, adapt, overcome, they say. I noticed that there was a small gap between the girl in charge of the table and the wall behind her. In my hunger-addled, chubby little Scottish 12-year-old mind, this was an invitation, an open gate through which I could pass and enter the realms of breakfast Valhalla. As I approached, however, the girl leaned forward over the desk, and her leg raises up behind her, effectively blocking my path. In my greatest, frick you, universe, moment to date, I believed, with complete confidence, that I could make it through the gap by simply jumping over her leg. Oh, how wrong I was. As I leapt, believing in my heart that I could soar through the air like a majestic eagle, my foot caught her leg. I felt a sharp change in my trajectory as I now began my rapid ascent towards the cold hard ground. And yet, I was so close to victory. I could smell the tantalizing air from the cafeteria, and I gained a surge of confidence. The jump may not have worked, but there was nothing stopping me from recovering this blunder. Moments from disaster. I simply needed to reach out, catch myself on the floor, and use my momentum to roll. from the roll, it would be a matter of standing up, recovering my balance, and making my way to the halls of deliciousness while my peers applauded. My left arm was on board with this new approach. My right arm did not get the memo, so when I struck the ground, my left arm took the full weight of my body, and the bones therein cleanly snapped halfway between my wrist and my elbow. The rest of my body came crashing down, and I hit the ground hard, sliding a good 5 feet from my landing site on the polished ground. I never did end up getting my breakfast, but I did get my first, and only, broken bones. In the ambulance, I was able to see that my hand had turned almost all the way around to face me, and the doctor said it was perhaps the cleanest break he had ever seen. I sucked at sports in high school. A kid on the opposite team threw a dodgeball I tried to catch, ended up breaking my thumb. It didn't really hurt, but it sure as hell wasn't supposed to bend that way. Closing my electric window from the outside, using the auto up button, it was 2/3 of the way up already, and my valuables were on the front set, so I thought I'd just lean in and quickly tap the button, and get my arm out in time. I was wrong lol. I'm glad phone cameras weren't a thing back then, because there would be footage of me on the internet trying to fish my keys out of my pocket as my arm is being crushed. Happened a couple days ago. Got home from work really hungry. Decided to try a turkey quesadilla with all the leftover turkey at my house. Popped that bad boy in the toaster oven and went upstairs to change out of my work clothes. I hear the ding from the oven and art down the stairs doing a silly jumping run thing because I'm an adult child. I missed a step and ended up coming down full weight on a couple of toes on my right foot. So now I have 2 broken toes and a burnt quesadilla. Was riding my bike home from school, decided to ride in a ditch going downhill, because that seemed fun. My front wheel got stuck in some kind of a hole. I flew a few meters and broke my wrist. I thought my wrist was just a bit hurt, but after my friend helped me walk my bike home, my grandma took me to the hospital because she was worried, and I ended up having to wear a cast for most of that summer. There are too many to count. One pretty memorable injury was drunken knife throwing. I was holding the knife by the blade with my index finger on what I thought was the spine. Nope. Sliced the frick out of my fingertip. My sister yanked her arm out of the socket by trying to remove her zipped up winter jacket with her feet. She lay on her back on the neighbor's porch, lifted both feet inside of the jacket, and kicked hard. When I found her, her feet were still tucked in her jacket, and she was rolling on her back like a screaming epileptic hedgehog. About 1.5 years ago, I 3D printed a phone case without properly leveling the plate, which caused the bottom layers to squish outwards. This meant that the design cut into the case was partially stuck together. So I got to work cutting it with a knife, like an idiot. I broke 2 major rules of knife safety. I used a dull knife, an old box cutter, because the blade of my sharper knife was too thick to separate the thin cute out without cracking the plastic, and I cut towards my hand. I think you can see where this is going. The knife slipped while I was applying force to it, and it sliced right down the back of my left middle finger. It was pretty deep, about 5mm at its deepest point. It went over the tendon, but I was lucky because that part was shallow enough not to damage it. I still have a visible scar 1.5 years later, but I luckily didn't suffer any permanent damage to my finger. I also still have the phone case, though it's mostly super glue now. Edit. Grammar. Also I realized I got the year wrong. I hurt my neck by sleeping in bed a little awkwardly. That's how you know you're old. You get injured just from sleeping. I was preparing an order of bricks for a pavement. It was half of a pallet, so I had to manually move half of them from a full one to an empty pallet. During that I smashed my finger with a brick. The sharp pain resulted in me pulling back my hand, and I hit myself in the face with the brick I was holding. Result: broken tooth, smashed finger and an open wound on my lip. This isn't me, but my twin, so it still counts. We had taken a walk to our childhood park from our mother's house, and decided to dick around on the playground for nostalgia's sake. My doppelganger was on the monkey bars, holding 2 bars at his sides, so that most of his body was above the monkey bars. He then had the bold idea to release the bars, and fall neatly through the square space between the bars. Turns out this plan doesn't go so well if you're looking where you're going. His nose hit the bar in front of him with the full force of his own body weight, after already having fallen like 3 feet. His nose was obviously bleeding, and he had a mild concussion on the walk back to the house, freaking out that he couldn't remember certain obvious things. His sniffer remains a testament to his epic failure, being marginally more Nordic than mine. When I was in 3rd grade I kicked a cone and dislocated my shoulder, later to find out I had a bone tumor growing there. I was drunk and a window looked at me funny. Drunk me didn't like that. Was running up some stairs, tripped, and knocked myself out on the edge of a stair step. Maybe 8 years old in school, we were given staplers. Cool, I thought. I can staple bits of paper together. Then I thought, I wonder if I can staple my finger to the desk. It turns out that you can, sort of. Anyway, I still have a scar on my little finger 40 plus years later. Not my injury, but I had sharpened all the knives in the house. I warned my BF that I did so, and they were sharp. What does he do? Runs his finger across the blade to check, sliced it right open. Knife was sharp enough he almost didn't feel the cut. Picking my nose, snapped a tendon in my finger. I put some hair gel in my hair, used a comb, and put the comb away. A few days after I moved the comb and somehow cut myself on the now hardened hair gel that was left on it. So yeah, hair gel drew some blood. I collect stupid injuries because I'm an impatient hyper person with all the grace of a meth-addled kitten. I've been impaled falling out of trees, had digits crushed because I trusted my sister even after the stairs incident and the poisoning, sliced my feet on space heaters, gouged my arms running past parked vehicles, and even managed to expose bone falling from a 2-foot wall. I've been stabbed twice, because I'm a jackass, an obvious point, because both times I was the one holding the knife, and have even managed to damage body parts most people have never even heard of by stepping on the point of a sword and violently ending up doing the splits. While all of those are stupid, there is almost always a degree of haplessness that makes them seem more acceptable. Climbing trees and fencing carry element of risk, after all, and even a normal person will collect a few scars doing that sort of thing. My stupidest injury came as a result of a duck. Ducks are delicious, and one of the simpler ways to prepare it is to quarter the bird, and then cook it with a combination of searing in a rocket hot pan followed by roasting in a hot oven. After careful preparation and seasoning, I managed to get the bird ready to be cooked, and manage the searing step without losing even a single scrap of newly crispy skin, and even managed to shove the whole assembly into an oven, set for a surprisingly hot 450 degrees, 230 degrees for the more sensible measurement. I busied myself making the side dishes, and, as I had throughout the preparation to that point, enjoyed a fancy-ish artsy idea. It is important to point out that though I'd been drinking, it had only been the one drink and most of it was still present. Had I known what sort of foolishness I was to partake in shortly, I'd have been drinking, as if it were the end of the world. The oven beeped in that same cheerless and entirely non-menacing sort of way that every cheap oven in every cheap apartment will. I threw open the door and jammed a senior spike into the bird at various points, and, satisfied that it had been heated beyond any likelihood of illness, but not so far as to ruin the duck's noble sacrifice, grabbed a folded towel set aside for exactly this sort of situation. Using the towel, I managed to pull the 450 degree pan from the 450 degree oven and placed it on the stove. I then turned back to retrieve the sauce base and a plate which would act as a temporary home for the duck while I assembled the pan sauce. Sauce base was set to the side, and I retrieved a set of tongs to pull the very hot bird from a pan radiating a worrying amount of heat. I removed the duck with such vigor that I slightly upset the pan's placement on the rickety electric stove top. To avoid an incident, I set the duck-laden plate aside and turned back to the pan, passing the still hot towel without so much as a pause. Wrapped my unprotected flesh around the steel handle of a steel pan and burned the ever-loving crap out of myself. That was just haplessness. Painful and stupid, yes, but common wisdom says that you put a towel on the handle of just such a pan because it is easy to forget just how hot a pan might be, and everyone makes mistakes. And so, with ice pack in my burned hand and my wife searching for some kind of burn ointment, I returned what attention I could tear away from the nerve-ending screaming bloody obscenities in my mind, and cursing my own incompetence, and sopped most of the fat from the pan, tossed in the aromatic base, and, using the same tongs as before, stirred them for a short saute. 2 minutes later, annoyed at my choice to use a small rickety burner, I set aside the ice pack so that I could force my still complaining hand to some useful purpose, grabbed the same obviously hot pan by the same obviously hot handle, and further burned the ever-living frick out of myself. My wife found the alocane, and I swore at the laws of thermodynamics. I moved the pan, this time using the towel, and I swore at Newton and his damnable law of cooling. My wife applied the gel promising blessed relief, and cursed the line of Alfred Einhorn for the fact that topical anesthetics was never any more useful than snake oil in my experience. My wife offered to finish the meal, at this point needing only a bit of flour and some stirring, and cursed myself for being the damn fool who could burn himself twice in the same sitting, in the same way, and without even the barest excuse of being drunk. I broke away from the cursing just long enough to agree that pushing my luck would no doubt end in fire or other disaster, and my wife assembled the rest of the sauce. I ate that duck in mangled bites because my usual cutting hand was on strike and refused to be useful. It was delicious. I broke my toe when I ran into a wall. Lego. Going to the kitchen to get a glass of water in the middle of the night, and Lego happened requiring crutches for the next 2 months. Was cleaning my car, a coupe. As I was vacuuming the front seat, I hit the lever to move the seat forward so I could start on the back. The seat lurched forward, hitting me hard in the temple. Got very disoriented and remember everything getting dark. Woke up on the ground. Sprayed myself with mace because I thought it was some fancy flashlight keychain. Picking up a 7-pound baby. Abdominal hernia. Not fun. Riding my 3-wheeled scooter down the footpath when I was about 8. I ran over a stick and planted into the ground. My whole bottom lip was split open. Tore my meniscus after jumping off of a roof to impress a girl. There needed to be surgery done on it, and to this day from time to time Miney reminds me about what an idiot I am. It's embarrassing how many times I've hit myself on the head with a milk crate at work. I've just stopped touching them at this point because I feel like these things are trying to give me a concussion. The most notable time, though, is that I put the crate on this rolling chip rack so I could take it to the back with me and set it in the return pile. When I went to grab it off, note, it was at the level of my head. I legit swung it at my face for no reason. I spent the next 5 minutes trying not to cry. Not me, but back in the 1980s a Marine on Camp Pendleton bit the head off a rattlesnake. Unfortunately, he bit into the venom glands and went into a coma. He lived, but paid a heavy price. I dropped an energy drink in a 50 or so foot hole, then decided I was gonna get it. We had a plastic laundry hamper when I was really little, like 5 or 6. For some reason I always wanted to sit on top of it, but I was getting too big for the lid to support my weight. Was told repeatedly not to sit on the hamper, so naturally I interpreted that as, don't sit on the hamper, in front of mom and dad. Eventually I fell through, the lid gave way and I fell into the hamper, and kneed myself so hard in the face that I broke my nose. When my parents took me to the doctor, he spoke to me alone and asked if my parents had hurt me, since my story sounded so ridiculous. This did not, as my parents hoped, teach me to listen better. It did leave me with a severely deviated septum. Years later, I was sliding on the wood floor in my socks, after my mom specifically told me not to. 4th grade. Broke my left radius and ulna. I never slide around on slippery surfaces like that anymore, or sit on hampers, but I still never quite learned to listen to my parents even after that. Sorry mom and dad. I tried to grab the funny bubbles in the pot of boiling water when I was 6. I was pulling weeds in the backyard. I went to the trash can to throw them away when I tripped over my shoelace. I then fell into the trash can, hitting my head. 15 stitches later I had a scar and an embarrassing story. I was bored as a kid and did as kids do, played with a knife. I was opening and closing it and wasn't paying attention and closed it on my finger. Pretty deep cut. Needed stitches but would have had to sit out the rest of my current basketball season. So I opted to them just bandaging it up. Have a pretty big scar on my finger and won the championship that season. Worth it. Not me but my little bro. He tripped on a staircase and got very angry at it. He kicked it full force and broke his toe point. He didn't have insurance at the time. Transition between insurances and mom was not amused. When I was 12 I rode my bike without a shirt on as well as with no hands on the handlebars. Obviously I fell and scraped the skin off on the left side of my body against the pavement and broke my arm. Never letting my hands off the handlebars again since. I'm 27 now. One time I was roller skating in my neighborhood. I decided to skate a mile away to this park. No phone, no friends. There was an area of pebbles that I decided to skate on. I don't know why I decided to skate on rocks, as if that makes any sense. Well, long story short, obviously I fell. However, I fell on my wrist, bent it completely back, snapped it, and had to skate all the way home with a dangling wrist bone sticking out and everything. Played with a shaving razor when I was very young. Got it stuck to my lip, then cried for my Oma who had to deal with me bleeding from my bottom lip and getting the razor off me. When I was in the Royal Marines, the ship I was on docked in Gibraltar. The second night there I returned to the dockyard very drunk. I saw the ship on the opposite side of the docks across about 100 yards of water. Drunk me thought it would be funny to swim across, so I headed for the edge of the dock and dived in. What I couldn't see was that the area next to the dock wasn't open water, but was a painter's pontoon, a floating flat platform for painting the sides of ships. Approximately 10 feet fall followed by hitting the pontoon left me with a broken arm and 22 stitches and 2 wounds. What hurt more was the abuse from my fellow royals. Ouch. Still makes me cringe years later. What a knobhead. I cut my finger trying to open the hood of our riding lawnmower. There was a plastic bit that was deceivingly sharp, and I didn't think to be cautious of freaking plastic. Jumped over a small bush and broke my leg, just so that I don't get caught while playing tag. Every time I get injured doing deadlifts is the stupidest. It tops the previous time or times where I obviously didn't learn my lesson about not freaking doing them anymore. I once stubbed my toe against a table leg hard enough to break my foot in 4 places. Broke my foot thumb while rushing to the front door to open it for my mom. I realized that it's broken like 5 to 7 hours after. I don't think this is my most stupid, but it's haunted me for years with my friends. I just finished teaching a class of volunteer firefighters the beginning of how to be a firefighter, such as getting dressed, how to put on your SCBA, how to search a room, and how the gear changes your mobility when you get off the truck. Had to make sure and say always use the handholds, always have 3 points of contact, blah blah blah. So we were unloading some hoses that got frozen from another class, and I decided I was too lazy to properly step off the tailboard off the truck and jumped right onto the frozen hoses, spraining my ankle and needing to go for x-rays. You get in really quick when you're in fire gear. Stood on a cactus, also jumped into a pool and broke my toe. Jumped out of a truck to try to make a basketball shot and ended up breaking my foot. Good thing was I got out of PE for a couple months and got to leave class early. I kind of miss high school now that I think about it, lol. I was rollerblading when I came upon a large Hispanic family walking abreast, taking up the entire pavement. Unfortunately I couldn't stop in time. I should have plowed through them and used them as my personal meat pillows, especially Diabito. But instead I twisted and fell on my tailbone, breaking it. My lower back hurt for 2 years. In high school, after a minimum day, my friends and I were waiting for a movie to start at a nearby park. For whatever reason, I got it into my head that running and jumping off the backrest of a bench while catching my car keys in midair was super cool, and maybe I could impress this girl I liked in the process. Well, like most teenagers, I was an idiot. After doing it 2 or 3 times, I slipped and my shin rammed into the backrest. This resulted in a tennis ball sized bump on my leg. Luckily there was no serious damage, but it was freaking dumb. Also didn't get the girl. Walking in the dark, barefoot. Trying to open a bike pump with an X-Acto knife while stopped at a stoplight while driving.